to add interactive into Flash, we can build projects that get really, really, really complex. We can do things that are completely driven through code, which is, to my mind, it's a whole lot of fun to do it that way. You can build things on the timeline. You can build things with code. Now, the big thing that you're doing with it is, I have an object here, and I don't like that object, so I'm going to delete that because I don't want strokes. I just want fills. It's easier to grab. So I have an object here. If I want to do anything with this object as it relates to building interactivity, this object must be a symbol, period. It has to be a symbol if I want to do something to it. And typically, we will turn objects that we want to make interactive into movie clips so that we can then make them become interactive objects. As it is, I drew a shape. The shape, I can convert it to a symbol, hit F8, give it a very clever generic name, box. And now, if I want to have this object interact with code, with ActionScript, the interactive language that Flash uses, as it stands right now, I have an object on the stage. Flash doesn't know what object this is, and if I have more than one, and I'll make them so they're slightly different. So these are all instances of that same box object, one in its natural state, one I've turned, one I've squished. But they're all instances of that same object. We can look in my library, see there is box. If I look in the properties, there's a field called instance name. So anytime I want to make something interactive, I should provide an instance name. If I fail to do so, Flash is now kind enough that it will provide an instance name to that object for me. I don't recommend using that, because then when you start looking at the code as your project grows more complex, the instance names are kind of FL_object1. Oh yeah, I know what that is. Object. They don't mean anything. It's better to give objects instance names yourself. There's a few rules you have to follow when you are creating instance names. And I'm just going to write these out because they're important. No spaces. You cannot put spaces in an instance name. So this box here, I could call it turned box. Now, the method that I used here is I used lowercase letters for the first word, and then I capitalized the first letter of the second word.
Is there a reason that you go first cap?
There is a reason that you don't capitalize the first letter, because instances, by convention, always start with a lowercase letter. That is a convention that as you start doing more and more complex programming, instances, think of them, they're like a variable object. They're a container for something. They reference a instance of a object. That's a lowercase thing. The object itself we reference through a capital letter. So if I look in my library, you'll notice that I subtly, when I typed, I actually used a capital B for box. So through code, I could actually construct and position and create an instance of that box object on my stage. I could type in a line of code. I could say var box type movie clip equals new box with a capital B, lowercase b, capital B, and then it would be able to put this object on the stage. So by convention, Instance names always start with lowercase. You are not allowed to put spaces in. So if I put in spaces, it will fail. If you want to see more differentiation, sometimes people will put in an underscore. That's okay. No periods in the names. You cannot start with a number. So I'll put the rest of these on a separate layer here. So no spaces, no number to start, no periods. So we have a few rules we have to follow. Once you get used to those, it's no big deal. And most people don't usually get too troubled by how they name things. But it's very important that you name them correctly. So here, my instance name cannot be box with a capital B, because that's the type of object it is. It says instance of box. Remember, this is from my box symbol. I put another one out. That is an instance of box. So I could call this box with a lowercase b because instance names are case sensitive. They are extremely case sensitive. Case sensitive. So capitalization, critical. Spaces, critical. Periods, critical. The instance name cannot match the type of object's name. You can't. So there's certain restrictions we have to follow. After that, you can name things whatever you want.
You can't do like a lowercase b box, even?
So it's a good practice to take over the naming of objects yourself. Actually, I'm going to undo the name I just put on a squished box and leave it like that. Because you don't want Flash to do it for you if you don't have to have it do it. Now, if I want something to happen, I can pull up my Actions window, which is accessed by hitting Option F9. My particular configuration here, I have access to it right here because I already added it. So I could start typing in code. I don't expect that you're going to just start typing in code because you don't know what code to start typing in. It's like giving someone a blank canvas and saying, go paint me a picture of, and then fill in a very highly complex, detailed list of subject matter, but then not give them any paint brushes or reference material. And then, let's see how it works. I would also recommend, I just turned off auto recovery there. Let's try as a general group turning off auto recovery so Flash doesn't stall every 10 minutes while it tries to save. And let's see if it allows our projects to work a little bit better. Let's do an experiment and find out if that's the case, because auto recovery seems to be more trouble than it's worth at the moment.
When did you turn that off? Whenever it pops up.
If I want to work with this, I probably should save before I continue on. Now that I have these objects here, we could start typing code. That would make you grumpy. That window is under Window. Actions right here. It's Option F9, Alt F9 if you're in Windows. And that pulls up the action window. I've taken that action window and I've attached it, because it would have opened up and looked like something like this. So it opens up as a window like this. Now you can take in Flash and you can take these things and drag them over to customize your look and feel. I'm actually going to put mine all the way up here. So it's button mode easy to get to. As you play in the UI, you'll find that you can customize it nicely. A lot of this customization with the little button mode and everything, it's the same as doing it in Photoshop, the same as doing it in Illustrator. It's an Adobe product. That's how they work. But I'm not going to ask you to just start coding in a blank Actions window because that's mean. Cruel and unusual punishment. Instead, as of CS5, Adobe introduced something called snippets. I was in the process of trying to figure out how I could write such a thing, because I would write sections of code, give that to my students, and give them the same code over and over. And I wanted to find a way, is there a way to kind of idiot-proof it? And then I found out CS5 was coming out with snippets built in. So, sweet, done. And the cool part is, when you learn how to program, you can even save a chunk of code that you've written as a snippet that I could then provide additional code as snippets to people if I needed to, now that this whole snippets is up and running. Snippets is right here. You see the two curly braces with the little kind of like page with the line icons on it. And it comes up and we can see here are different options. Now, we're not going to do mobile touch events, mobile gesture events, mobile actions, so we're not doing the bottom four. But the upper ones are ones we're going to concern ourselves with. If you start doing Android development and iPhone development and things like that using Flash as your authoring tool, then you will care about those bottom things. Right now, we don't. But let's say I go under Actions, and I will see that here are some actions. Now, if I click on one, it gives me a little kind of tooltip that comes up, and if I click on the eye, it gives me a description. It says clicking on the specified object loads the URL in a new browser window. Sweet. If I want to preview what the code looks like, it shows me what the code is going to look like so I can decide if I'm going to get scared or not. It's all good. Now, if I double click on this, and the way to insert a snippet is double clicking on it, it says this action requires an object to be selected on the stage. Oh, all right. Well, if I were to click on my box, go to my snippet, double click on click to go to web page, it now added actions, it added code to my project. Now, a couple things are really important to point out here. It added a new layer and called that actions. That layer has a little A on it, indicating that there is code on that frame. Flash does not allow you to put ActionScript or code on objects themselves. You add it to a frame. Much like sound doesn't go on an object or in an object, sound goes on a frame. That frame's in a timeline. That timeline could be in an object. But here, your best course is to always try to put your actions in the main timeline whenever possible. So here, I can click, I can look at this, and now we have some things that have happened here. Now, it's using like really ugly naming conventions here that I don't like. FL_click to go to web page. Yuck. On the other hand, I didn't have to type it, so I guess it's not that bad. ActionScript is it's an event-based language. Now, ActionScript is an ECMAScript language. It's the same, it comes from the same parent specification that JavaScript and Python are derived from, which is ECMAScript. And if you learn to code in one, the others are fairly similar. The way you structure things and work with it is very similar. Syntax is very similar. ActionScript itself is an event-based language. It wants events to happen. No events, no action. Clicking on something is an event. Pushing a key on your keyboard is an event. Having the playback head enter into a new frame is an event. You can even create events to track, say, when an object gets to a certain position on my screen. That triggers an event. So we can have all of these events occur. When events occur, we call a function. The function that's called, think of it as a verb. So instance names are objects. We put those on nouns. My box, it's an object. An object is a noun. But when I click on that, I'm going to tell Flash, listen for the moment that I click on this object. So we say, add event listener. Now, you could type all this in, and it used to be before snippets. We would actually go through, and I would be like saying this, and you'd be typing along with it, and you'd be going, this is the dumbest thing on the planet. I hate you. Flash is evil, et cetera, and we need double gin and tonics. with a shot of Everclear to really spice it up. But the language as it goes here. Some people may find down the road that they land into positions where they become more of a developer. Your job is to do programming and code. Others of you are going to land in positions down the road where you have to know where the code is, and you have to understand what things you might change in it to tweak how it works. But you're not going to be called upon to stare at a white screen and just start typing out of the blue. That's actually quite rare, because if I ran a company and you were my designer and I needed you to tweak a project, would it be a wise action just to say, oh, I'll let you figure out how to code that using whatever style and method of coding that you want? Probably not going to stay in business very long, because we're going to do some really dumbass coding errors. It's the same way that if you tell a designer to do really complex web page layout coding versus having the developer who actually knows how to do it and then integrates it into this workflow system that the company already has, so we don't try and reinvent a wheel that didn't need reinventing. So rarely do the designers get handed a blank screen and say, go make the code to make it interactive. But you do need to be able to kind of do what the comments here say. The comments are the things in gray. And it gives you instructions. It says, replace this URL with your desired URL address. Because currently, if I click on that box, it's going to go to adobe.com. So I can save this. I can load my web page and click, and I went to adobe.com.
And it will automatically open in default browser and a new window and everything.
Or if I'm in my web browser, it will open in a new tab.
Cool.
So if I am in Flash, close the Swift, and if I publish this, or go to Publish Settings, publish as my Flash and my HTML, I hit OK. And now let's go find this and open it up. It will be in Class Interactive. Oh, I forgot to actually hit Publish. I hit my Publish settings. Let's try again. I'll just say Publish, and that will make both. And now there's my HTML. Double click. There it is. Click this box. Oh, and my security settings on Flash need some tweaking. That's a topic we'll get into at a future date. I thought I'd already fixed it on this machine. Flash tries to be helpful that it doesn't allow something on one kind of server to access resources on a different server unless that other server, unless both servers already have kind of file agreements of we're going to play nice with each other. So it prevents hackers from putting Flash on a website that then goes and grabs malware off of their servers and installs it on your machine. So it's in your best interest. But this requires some changing that I don't want to get into at the moment. But if I'm in the standalone, then it worked OK. So let's see. I click on an object. I go to snippets. Well, I could do something that I could, let's see. I'm going to say click to hide an object. So the instructions tells me it will clicking the specified object hides it. Okay. So I have my turned box. Add the snippet to it. Turn box listens for a click. When we click on it, it makes its visible property, can we see it or not, become false. So if I test this movie now, click on it, I just made the object disappear. Now the problem is I didn't put anything on any object to make it come back. So we might need to do a little change with that. So let's just take this box here, and I could say, let's show an object. And notice right now, it came up, I clicked to add the thing, and if you remember, I never added an instance name to this object. So now it says the selected symbol requires an instance name. And its default name it wants to come up with is movie clip 1. in CS5, not 5.5, it automatically will say it needs an instance name. Do you want us to provide one? And it doesn't give you an option of what you want it to be. It just defaults it to movie clip 1, 2, 3, whatever. So at least now we have the option to provide that. So I'm still a big fan of doing it manually here. Squished box. So now, click on Squish Box, go to Snippets, and choose Show an Object. Now, if I look here, it's not quite giving me what I want. So this is where we're going to have to put our thinking caps on and do a little bit of work of how to work with this code. To modify this so that it works, what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to get rid of, in the interest of space, I'm getting rid of the comments that it puts it in. When it shows up in gray, it's a comment. It's a good idea when you start working on projects, if you want to put in comments, the /* and then / is a block comment. If you just want to do a single line, you do 2 slashes, and then you can type whatever you want after it. It's the same way to comment something out in JavaScript. So I would encourage you to use comments, because now if I look at this and come back to this code in, say, a month or 2 months or 3 months, it might not make sense. But if you put comments in, you can put notes to yourself to help understand it a little bit better. So if I want to make it that I can click on the other box, the squished box, so that it makes that object show, it's going to be very much kind of, this code repeated, but tweaked a little bit. So I can copy paste, and now this is squished box, and then I'll just change this to show. Show true. And we don't even need that line anymore. So turn box and squish box are both listening for a clicking event. If I click on turn box, it hides itself. When I clicked on the squished one, it's going to call the show function. Naming of functions, so we have the word function, then the name after it, that's the name of the function, follows the same guidelines as naming instances. No spaces, no periods, no funny, don't start with numbers, just do letters, and camel case where you capitalize the first letter in subsequent words is a good way to go, and underscores are allowed. Now, think of instance names refer to nouns, the objects. Functions are verbs, things that then happen. So squished box is listening for the event of a click on the mouse. When that happens, it's going to then tell this action, this verb, to take place. And then this is the definition for that. The exact syntax on here, a function is always written the same. You have the word function, the name of the function, parentheses, and then you have the type of event. If there was one that's calling this function, then you do :void unless your function returns something. Don't worry about that 99% of the functions that you would be called upon to work on in the near future will all be with the word void after it. Then you have a curly brace, then what things you want to have happen, and closing curly brace. When we see object dot something, we're referring to a property of that object. Object dot x, object dot y, object dot width, object dot height, object dot scale x, object dot scale y, object dot rotation, rotation x, rotation y, rotation z. These are all properties. They're the same things we get when we click on an object and you see properties over here. Those are all modifiable then through code. We can change all of these properties that we see with an object through ActionScript. So I'm going to save this, run it, I click here, it goes away. Click here, it comes back.
Yay!
My code works. So I have a new object named smallbox, and let's see, drag and drop. Let's see if that does. Makes the specified object movable with drag and drop. Okay, that's cool. All right, I'm going to do that. So here it added in some code. If I don't want to hurt my brain with the code, I can just run my movie and I can see that, oh, look at that, it's now draggable. I've now made that interactive so I can do something with it. No pain involved in that. Let's see. Click on the object. Click on the snippet. Drag and drop. The object's now movable. So as you keep working with things and trying it, now this one, I'm just going to call this B2 in the interest of time. And I could choose move with keyboard arrows. The code it writes for this is ugly. I'm just going to throw that out right now. The code it writes to move with the keyboard arrows I don't like, but it works. Or I could choose these other animated effects, but I'll choose move with keyboard arrows. Okay, click, come on. And we're having a little unhappiness now with Flash. Object, snippet, and it should move, but it's freezing. So through pain and suffering, I got it to insert, and now I can push the keys on the keyboard, and we can see that said box moves around based on my keyboard input. So as you start trying to build interactivity, build functionality, put that into your code, it will get kind of interesting. If I get rid of one of those objects that I've put on screen, now go to run my code, I got a whole bunch of error messages here. So if you add things, delete things, but leave the code that was associated with them, it might get grumpy. Now the nice part about Flash is the code, and that was the worst one to do because that was the longest chunk of code, which is why I have so many error messages. If I did, like for one of these other boxes, it would have only given me one line of error. So now I'm getting all these. But when I get the error message, if I double click on it, it comes up and it shows me the line that it's unhappy with. So currently, it's telling B2, which was that box, to listen for each frame, and then it tells the stage to listen for key up and key down, and then it changes the positions of my stuff. And frankly, to undo this or to get rid of all those error messages, if I just get rid of anything that was inserted as part of that, now that I've done that, I can save it, run it, no more error messages. Clicking that goes to Adobe, clicking this it goes away, clicking here comes back and moves that over, and then this object is draggable. So I have some basic interactivity at work here. There's other animated things I can do through code. I can also go through my timeline. So in my animation, I can now stop. I can click on something to go to a certain frame. I can click to go to a previous frame. There's a lot of options available to me that I can do very readily. Now I only have a one frame movie, so those are all kind of meaningless, but in a longer movie you could do that. Audio and video, so I could tell sounds to start playing, stop playing, tell video to play, tell video to stop. So I could build a whole little Flash video player if I had a video file that I was loading. There's quite a few actions available. And if you want to be even more kind of generic, you can even go, well, what about a mouse over event, a mouse out event? So everything doesn't just have to be a click. You can have more granular control of what's happening with the mouse and that type of input on your computer.